Okay, so welcome to this week's edition of Book Chat, and I'm so excited to have my friend Rachel McDaniel here, and she writes the best historical mysteries with lots of romance. And so we'll talk about the 1920s, and she's working on a time slip, but really going to focus today on mysteries and romance and how we weave them all together. And then I think Rachel's going to give a book away, and I'll probably give a copy of Lethal Intent away. So be sure and leave us comments. Yay! So Joy's here, and Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Rebecca
and Karen, and oh, this is so fun. So when I'm looking back there, it's because I'm looking at my big monitor to look at the comments y'all are leaving. But Rachel, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're writing, and then we'll dive into Red Canary.
I'm a stay-at-home mom with a background in magazine publication, editorial side of that. I write, as Cara said, historical romance that is primarily set in the 1920s. And I hail from Ohio, where we are now blanketed in lots of snow, and it's really cold.
Isn't it great? I mean, I don't know about y'all, but this was our first real snow. And Alan and Sarah are here, yay! But like we got 7 inches, and we were like, yay! It's finally winter. So, how much did you guys get in Pennsylvania?
We got about probably around that 7-8 inches, and then so school was canceled yesterday, and then more snow happened overnight, and we got to have delays today. But
so I bet your kids are thrilled. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how you decided on the 1920s. Out of all the different time periods, what just really grabbed you about the 20s and sucked you in?
Okay, actually, at first, it was the market, because I started out writing World War II. And actually, Red Canary was actually set at the very beginning in World War II. And I just kept getting lots of feedback from editors saying, you know, there's really not much wiggle room, or it's kind of crowded during this era. And so I tried to think, well, maybe I could pick it up and place it somewhere else. And it actually fit better in the 20s because of the Prohibition. And actually, what's funny is I grew up 20 miles south of Pittsburgh. And so actually, when I was going through research, I didn't know half the stuff about Pittsburgh that I discovered through research. Like, it had some really dark times. Like, it was called the wettest city in a dry nation during the Prohibition. In fact, the word speakeasy actually came from Pittsburgh. It was a saloon owner was telling her patrons to speak easy because she did not have a liquor license. So a lot of the Prohibition things that we see, a lot of it originated in Pittsburgh. So I thought that was fun just to zero in on that and create some stories during that era.
Well, it's really fun because Stacy, Rebecca, and Joy and Karen have all read it and loved it. And so there's all these exclamation points. Yes, I read it. I loved it. It was great. And I've got to say, as someone who has written a lot of World War II, you know, when you dive into a time period, you really have to kind of immerse yourself. It's not just, okay, the date on the calendar is 1928 or it's 1942. You've got to immerse yourself in the culture. And that's one of the things that I loved about the Red Canary is the language that Vera was using, the way that Mick was talking. And, you know, it felt like you really had kind of soaked yourself into that time period. So what did you do? How did you pick up on the vernacular and things like that? Because it's a very specific kind of way of talking, and it felt just very real and genuine.
Oh, thank you for that. The research was fun. It was so timely that there was a museum that were actually, you know how like they take different exhibits for a certain amount of time. Well, there was a Prohibition exhibit in Pittsburgh, and it was like I found it and it was only like the last weekend. So I'm like, we have to go. And it was just loaded with things. They had like flasks that were like hidden in walking sticks. So you pulled it out and there was a vial. I mean, obviously it didn't have alcohol, but it was just like all this stuff. They had like little doors that you would knock on and to do a secret knock to get in the Prohibition. It had like a makeshift speakeasy where you can go in and see how much they would have charged you if you wanted to get a drink. It was so hands-on, and I learned a lot better with hands-on.
Yeah.
And so I just took lots of notes, took lots of pictures. People thought I was crazy probably because I was taking videos.
I've been known to do that. When you find that magical museum exhibit and you're just running around taking photos going, I've got to capture this all because I don't know yet what's going to be important. But those details just made Red Canary come to life for me. And so I think you did a great job. And it was because I was wondering, like, did you watch movies? Did you read books? But finding that exhibit it sounds like it was exactly the perfect thing to do.
It was, and it was, we spent a lot of time there, and my kids are probably really growing bored, but they just had lots of stuff. They even had like an old 1928 Roadster, and it had they wore driving dusters back then, where it was like shoulders to knees jackets. And so that kind of was like right before I started transitioning Canary back to the 20s. The research was fun. How much they would have charged you.
Yeah, sorry. It's like finding out how much they charge for things is really hard.
Yeah, and what was also interesting is that I did watch some movies, but a lot of it was silent movies until the 20s.
That's true.
Yeah. But there was a lot of websites that helped with the jazz slang. And some of it I had to tone it down actually, because I had it like really saturated with jazz slang, and they're like, shoot, no one's going to understand what you're saying. You're gonna have to do a glossary. So I had to kind of tone it down and kind of couch it in around it so readers can pick up, okay, this means that, mud means coffee, things like that.
Well, and
but it was fun.
That is one of the challenges though, because you get so immersed in it. And as an author, it can be really tricky to know where to draw that line, where there's enough to make a reader feel like, oh, I'm in that time period. I feel like I'm in the car with Mick and Vera, but not so much that you're like, okay, quit beating me over the head with it. I get that we're in the 20s. I get that we're in the jazz era. And so I think you found that right balance, because it was just enough that every time I'd see one of those slang phrases, I smiled and went, oh, she did her research. This is really great. But it wasn't so much that I was like, okay, enough. I've got the idea. And that's hard to do. I mean, it really is a challenge.
Yes. And a lot of it was kind of a nod to, I love classic movies and the Thin Man series.
Oh, I adore those. Those are our favorites here.
The song, I think it's the Song of the Thin Man, one of the very last ones. And it was set on a jazz boat, and they had the jazz singer and the slang. And so I was like, this is so cool. And I didn't even realize I had so much like Nick and Nora in it. I'm like, Mick and Vera, Nick and Nora. I didn't even do that on purpose.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fun, because they've been longtime favorites of mine. And now they're some of our kids' favoriits. And we have the whole collection of those movies. And there's just something about Myrna Loy and William Powell, the chemistry that they have together is just so fun. And the fact that they got to keep doing those movies, and it was this whole series of them. It would be really fun to see, who would you cast as Vera?
Well, I kind of did an old school. She's a little bit, what is her name? Rita Hayworth.
Yes.
She has that Rita Hayworth flair. Mick, I really couldn't. He has a little bit of the Captain America in him. Steve Rogers a bit.
There's just something about Chris Evans and Captain America that is just so all-American. I think I've got two heroes in the Hidden Justice series who kind of follow after him, because it's just, I don't know why, it's that all-American thing. And this is fun because Joy and Rebecca and stuff are commenting about how the classic movies are just the best. So
they are.
Actually, as you were talking about the silent movies, I immediately went to Singing in the Rain. Kind of set in that time period, and it's so funny because I think it's White Christmas, maybe, the gal from Singing in the Rain, who's the silent, with the wacky voice that, whatever
Yes.
she's in it, and my kids go, oh, there's the gal from Singing in the Rain, and I'm, because it was a very different world when it was all silent movies. You could have a ridiculous voice, and it was no big deal. Joy's
Right.
like, we'll take all the Captain America heroes we want to give her. No problem, Joy. I was not an Iron Man person until Endgame. And then it surprised me how every time I watch Endgame, I sob at the end. I sob. And I'm like, if you told me in Iron Man 1 that I would care that much about Tony Stark. Oh, yes, Rebecca, that's it. Lena's her name. The character's name. So it is kind of fun just to think about how much we can pick up from watching the culture from the time and listening to the music. And there's so much good music from the 20s and the jazz era, just so much. So how do you, because you've got a pretty complex mystery going on in Red Canary, and I have Above the Fold, but I haven't read it yet. That's your earlier book. How do you find that, I guess, the balance of weaving the mystery with the romance, with the history? Because that's really 3 different threads that you're trying to keep moving at the same time through the book.
Right. I think it's kind of different for each book. With Canary, that was kind of like my first book I wrote when I learned the craft.
Okay.
And so it took me the longest to write.
Well, changing the time period is not going to make that easy.
No, but it is interesting trying to find that balance between, because you have to make it authentic too, because if someone's chasing after you, you're not going to stop and gaze into each other's eyes. There's something you got to have that believability, so you have those breathable moments when they can look into each other's eyes, when they can let down their guard. But it is, you have to be very careful on that regard.
So which comes first for you? Is it the characters or the plot, or is it kind of a combination of both?
I think that's different for each book too. So with Canary, it was the characters, because I could just hear Vera and I can see her. Like I can see her singing, I can hear her and her little snappy attitude. I can see Mick exuding broodiness. And so with them, it was character. And then I'm like, and it has a little bit, if you read it, it has a little bit of a noir feel to it.
Yes, it does.
And so and that was purposeful too, because I love noir stuff as well. So it has that, and so that one was more character driven, and I kind of was like, I didn't really, the mystery kind of came as I wrote it. With the Above the Fold, that one was more plotted, and then the characters came on. Above the Fold was is a nod to Cary Grant's His Girl Friday.
Okay.
And so that one's a nod to that one. And so but there's, on that one, it was more plot. So I think and then this time slip that I'm doing, it is way more plot because I've never written a time slip before. So I'm like, I better kind of map this out and see if I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And then let the characters fit. And so Karen says that Rachel did amazing weaving everything together. I loved both of her stories. So you're doing something
thank you.
Yeah. So, one of the things I wasn't planning on this, but Stars in the Night is one of my, it's the World War II, and it's got
the Hollywood, right?
What? Yeah. So Orient Express, Murder on the Orient Express meets World War II Hollywood.
Yeah.
And, it was funny because I literally got, I think it was 20 pages from the end. And I was like, I got on the phone with my friend, Robin Miller, who writes as Robin Carroll. And I'm sitting in Panera. And one of my, I've got a babysitter. I'm writing for a few hours. I've got to finish this book because I'm on deadline. And I was like, Robin, I don't know who did the murders. And there's 4 bodies. And I'm like, I don't know who did it. And before that, all of my books had been plotted because they were for Heart Song, they were for love-inspired suspense, and all of those needed, a chapter-by-chapter synopsis. And I'm like, how did I get to the end? 20 pages from the end of this book. And I'm not sure. And then as we talked it through, I was like, oh, I know who did it. but I just needed kind of that confirmation that I wasn't insane. And so, it is interesting how each book can be a little bit different and the approach can be a little different. And Janine's like, I love how your books have that fun classic movie feel. And to me, that's like the highest compliment when I'm writing like a World War II and people are like, okay, this feels like it should be a movie. It feels, it's so cinematic. I am so immersed in the time period. And I really felt that way as I was reading Red Canary. And I think I started above the fold, but I just don't remember if I finished it or not. Because as we were talking, I'm like, I really think I have read it. And so it was the title again, Stars in the Night. So
that highlights Hollywood, like the old classic Hollywood. So
yeah, and that one really is. That is my love story to classic movies and what Hollywood did during World War II, because it's based on real events. But on the wise advice of my agent, I didn't have Bing Crosby and Groucho Marx and Laurel and Hardy on the train, suspects in a murder, because she was like, there are statesmen like that. So I created a second train with all fictional movie stars, and that was kind of fun to do. But that's one of the things you have to think about when you're dealing with history is how does it intersect with the real world, with real events, and how are we going to honor the truth of what happened while recognizing that what we're writing is fiction. And so it's kind of a challenge. How do you find that balance? Because when we started this conversation, you were talking about, how Speakeasy came from Pittsburgh and, how it was the wettest town in a dry country. How do you figure out this is the place that this story should be told or located?
Right. Actually, it came out of a rejection for one of my novels because the story went all the way to pub board, and they're like, well, the thing is that you can pick up this book and you can place it anywhere, anytime. And it says it has to be why this place, why this era.
Yeah.
And so that's why I picked Pittsburgh, because there was so much dark years during that time. The policemen were bots, the city officials and the government were run by bootleggers and crime lords. And so they were setting up their empires in Pittsburgh. And there was a time where there was over 500 speakeasies throughout the city, ranging from like little seedy hole in the walls to like rich, swanky one. There's actually the William Penn Hotel had a speakeasy underneath its lobby. It actually had a secret tunnel that went out in case there was a raid. And for years, it wasn't, but just in the past couple of years, they remodeled it to its former glory. And you can go to the William Penn Hotel and go to the speakeasy.
That is so fun. So did you go there? Did you go down? And
I did not, but I wanted to, but I had to call and get permission and all that kind of stuff because it is actually owned now by Omni, and so there was a lot of tape to go through. Okay. So I was like, oh, never mind.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to create your own. Just rename it, put it in the same location, rename it, things like that. Which I guess sometimes in contemporary novels we have to do, but it seems like with history there's even kind of more of that. And I don't know about you, but I can get down so many rabbit trails. Just all of a sudden, like I remember researching Stars in the Night, I needed a location in Atlanta that would have been big enough to host a USO event with stars from Hollywood. And I'm, walking on Google Earth down this street. I'd found a department store that had been there that they could have a scene in. And I, found these photos. And then all of a sudden the hotel they're staying at, I'm realizing was the site of the largest hotel fire disaster in history. And it happened in 1946. So I'm over here doing all this research because I'm like, that's fascinating. My husband's like, aren't you on deadline? Aren't you supposed to be like writing words that matter? And I'm like, no, this is interesting. Who cares that it's 3 years after the book happens? It's interesting. And so, that can also be the challenge when you love the history is you can just kind of find yourself in all kinds of little nooks and crannies. So before I ask Rachel my next question, if you have questions, make sure you leave a comment. And Amy's laughing at my comment there. But Google Earth is a great research tool, Rebecca.
It is.
If you have any questions for Rachel, be sure and drop them in the comments, because I want to make sure you get a chance to talk with her as well. So you said you're working on a time slip now, and this one will be coming out from Barber when?
September 1st.
September 1st. Okay, so no wonder you're in the edit stage. And you're working with Pepper and Allison Pittman, and who was the other person?
There's Kimberly Woodhouse, and there's a couple more, and they're each like Allison's released, I think 2 days ago, yesterday. I think her Lady in Residence, it released yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Pepper's release.
I endorsed that one.
Yeah, there it is. Pepper's releases in April. I think Kim's Woodhouse's releases in July, I think, and then mine's September.
That's awesome. So is what connects these stories is they all have that time slip. There's the historical thread and then the contemporary thread, or what kind of connects these books?
They all are set at a historical landmark. So like Pepper's at the Biltmore, Kim's is at the Golden Gate Bridge. Okay. Allison's is at the Menger Hotel in San Antonio.
And where's yours?
And mine is set aboard the Belle of Louisville steamboat. So I thought it was neat to actually have it be a moving landmark. So in the 1920s, it actually had a different name called the Idlewild, and it ran excursion trips, and I would also take on freights. And so I set a mystery aboard the Idlewild and connected it to the contemporary, which is now, it's called the Belle of Louisville, and it's wharfed in Louisville, Kentucky. And so there's a mystery that connects the contemporary to the historical. So it was fun to write.
Yeah, but it is a lot more complicated when you've got to try and connect. And so plotting would become much more important. And Stacy says she loves time slips. I do too. And I had the best mail day today because I got the Paris Dressmaker, which is
amazing.
It's not really a time slip, but it bounces back and forth in
It is in a way, because it goes back and forth to like before the war and like right at the end of the war.
And then it keeps before the war keeps getting closer to the end. And so it was really, so it's like a small time slip, but it was really fun. And hey, Tony, thanks for joining us. And then I got this one today too.
Still stalking my mail. My mail has been so late lately. I got a Christmas card like a week ago. So I'm still waiting for that one to
happen. So what have you read lately that you're like, man, this is a book that people should definitely put on their to be read pile, or you're like, it was just one that I can't walk away from?
So after I turned in my my book, I had to submit it a couple weeks ago. So I always go on reading binges because I don't read very much while I'm doing the edits and all that kind of thing. So let's see, I read Glory Falls by Janine Roche, and that one was I think that's my favorite. I loved all of them. Yes, Thomas. I really liked all three books, but that one is my favorite because it has like that fish out of water kind of hero, I really liked him. He's like the silent brooding type.
Oh,
but
yes,
so kind of like so filled with passion and emotion, and I just loved it.
Well, and Janine will be with me next week, so we'll be talking about Glory Falls and her others. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. And so I really enjoyed that one. I read the Paris Dressmaker, and that one was really, really good too. That one was Abigail Wilson's new one, The Vanishing at Lock Speed.
Vanishing at Lock Speed. Yeah, that was so good. I read that one for endorsement. So I keep forgetting that it's coming out like right now.
I read it so early.
Ago. Yeah. So, and the same thing with Allison's. I read it for endorsement and totally forgot, oh, it's coming out now. And then I got it in the mail. I was like, yay, it's out. So yeah, those are all really good books and very different. It sounds like you're the kind of reader that I am, where it's all over the place. So, and don't forget, for the giveaway, make sure you leave a comment. So right now you could tell us what you're reading and what you would recommend for people, because I just finished a book like an hour ago, so I'm looking for my next read. So I definitely need recommendations. I also need someone to hold me accountable to a word count right now because the semester's been a crazy start. So let's see. Oh, the other one I got that I just started is this one. I read all
I
time.
read that one too. Yes, that one.
Is
I
it good?
really, I really liked it. What was amazing about that one is that almost each character had an amazing journey. Like you can see the growth in
Oh, I
and
love that.
three of the characters, the hero, the heroine, and even one of the side characters. I was like, that's amazing. Like they went through a traumatic experience,
Yeah.
and you see the ones where it changed for the better, and how it changed people for the worse. And so and plus it was just so rich in detail, and you almost felt like you were at the World's Fair. It was really amazing. Like they talked about the fountain that you can dip your handkerchief in because it was filled with perfume, and
Oh
a
my
French perfume. So it was just really detail rich, and it had a mystery. So that was good. It was good too.
Yeah.
I really liked that one.
So I don't know about you, but when I'm reading historical or definitely contemporary, I like there to be something more going on. I love having a mystery in it. I love having, just something that kind of pulls the action along so that it's not just this internal, the character's growing, there's a little something going on. Because like just straight romance, it's kind of a foregone conclusion. The hero and the heroine are going to get together unless you're reading a Nicholas Sparks book. And then they're not because it's a love story. It's not a happily ever after.
And then you throw the book across the room. Anyways.
Yeah, exactly. And you're going to be like, I can't believe that happened. But and so I love it when there's a book that has rich characters. And if it's historical, that I can feel like I'm there. Because that advice you got on, the setting, the time period needs to feel like a character. It needs to be so integrated into the story that you literally cannot pick it up and move it somewhere else and have it be the same. That's why the idea that you moved it from the 40s to the 20s, I'm like, that's a lot of work because the details they're just different. Even the way they talked and what people were watching.
The fashion.
And so, okay, Stephanie's here. Oh, suspense in historical stories. I totally agree, Suzanne. I love, there are several series that I have in basically every time period where I love them because they've got this great sense of setting, some suspense, and then there's characters that I want to keep coming back to.
Right.
How about you?
Oh, definitely. I'm with you on having something else that drives the plot along. I get so easily distracted, like really bad. Yeah. And so if things tend to kind of stretch a bit, I'm really tempted to skim, and I hate skimming. But if there's a mystery, I'm like, I have to have my eyes glued to the page because I don't want to miss a clue. I don't want to miss like something that the author inserted that I'm gonna need for later, so I can catch back. Like, oh, that's what they mean. So like right now, that's how I'm reading Lethal Intent. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to see, but just, and then of course the romance. I want to see how that is intertwined with the mystery, and then that brings it to the conclusion. So I am with you 100%. I love action, I love mystery, and of course I love swoony romance.
Yeah, exactly. So having that swoony romance that, you've got the characters that you just really want them to get together. And I think with Nick, you really did that. You created this brooding hero who is doing so many things so right, but Vera's not seeing any of that. And so, when you're like, she has this snappy character and I can hear her in my head, and they're just kind of missing each other. So how did you, was that fun to write these two characters who see the world so differently and kind of have them inch closer together, or did they drive you crazy?
No, I really liked it. I liked seeing them butt heads. And then, match hearts. It just, I enjoyed the banter. I could almost hear that in my head too. Like her just, like, she's such an instigator with him. Like she enjoyed getting a rise out of him.
Yeah, she liked poking him.
Yes. And so Mick, a lot of his characteristics, because this was the first book that I wrote after learning the craft, a lot of the characteristics I borrowed from my husband because he is that quiet type and no nonsense until you get to know him. And then, it's different. So that's why I try to have Mick at the very beginning kind of just seem so standoffish, but as Vera got to know him, it was things opened up, conversation opened up, and they were, there was more in common than what they thought at the beginning.
Yeah. And you definitely feel that momentum. You feel that shift. And then you have, and I'm forgetting her name right now, but the next door neighbor character who's kind of like the mentor for Vera while they're at the cabin. And so so that was a fun play too. I mean, it wasn't just these two characters, which it would have been tempting to do because they're kind of hiding off in a cabin for a lot of the book. But you still have them surrounded with a couple of people that can provide wisdom or be a foil to them. And so when you were writing this, did you see it like a movie? You mentioned hearing the characters sometimes. I mean, is it all just kind of words on the page, or is there a different process for you?
For this one, it was special because a lot of it was set in the Allegheny Forest, and that was where I grew up. My parents had, and my grandparents, and actually my whole family, like even distant relatives, they all had plots of land right in the thick of the Allegheny Forest. So we would go there that would be our vacations. Like we would go there on weekends, we'd go there on Memorial Day, and I don't know what my parents were thinking, but I would just traipse all over the forest. There was bears and there was rattlesnakes and I was really familiar with the sights and the smells and even the textures of the ferns and the dry pine needles. And
that's awesome.
Yes. So and there really was there's a scene where I wrote where they actually climb up a hill and there's a rattlesnake. There is actually a place called Rattlesnake Hill, and we would climb up there and always avoid it. But as if the rattlesnakes know they can't go off that hill. I don't know why I thought that, but for some reason, we would only be like 50 yards away, and we're like, oh, we can't go past there. It's Rattlesnake Hill, but anyways,
we're safe over here.
Yes, exactly. So that was easy for me to picture. It was easy for me to put my character, just drop them in there.
Yeah.
Because it was so real to me. With my time slip, because of COVID, when I wrote the proposal a year ago, I was like, okay, if I get a contract for this, I'll go to Kentucky and I'll tour the Belle in Louisville. I'll get all this information. Well, COVID happened. And then in Louisville at that time, there was a lot of riots. So it was off limits to people coming. And so I had to kind of dig deep. I found some research books written by someone that actually did the renovations from in the Belle, and a lot of people that were just posted YouTube videos. So that's how I was able to get like the feel of how the flow of it. So that one was different because I never been on there. So I had to really use my imagination and really rely on YouTube.
And that's where actually being a writer in today's world is so helpful, because we have tools like Google Earth and YouTube and TripTech or TripAdvisor, I guess, is one I use a lot, because even with the Lethal Intent series, even with Hidden Justice, I lived in DC for 8 years. So a lot of the places my characters go to eat or where they're hanging out, where they're living, I mean, Savannah from Flight Risk lives in my old townhouse. She literally lives where I lived, but I'm still on Google Earth all the time going, okay, how would you get here? What's this high school look like? I've eaten at Clyde's, which is, this one opens with a date at one of my favorite restaurants. And I'm still Googling it and, Pinteresting all the photos to be like, okay, what does it look like today? Because that was a long time ago now. So what does it look like? How does it feel? Do people still go there, or are all the locals going, that place is such a dump? And so it's, even when you know a place, it can be tricky to make sure you get all the details right, because if you don't,
you'll get caught on it. You will get caught. You will get emails, and you'll get caught on it. Even if you're right, you'll still get emails. I remember when I first started, I got called on a historical detail. They're like, well, they didn't have this back in the day. I'm like, yes, they did, but I didn't say it. I'm like, okay, thank you. But
Well,
it's
one
just,
of the things I've been known to do in my historicals, and I'll do it every once in a while in the contemporaries, but it's usually not as important. But in the historicals, I would put comments with links to things because I was like, my editor would sometimes question something, various editors. I'd be like, no, I've actually done my research. So my drafts, I started putting the links in there so that they would
yeah.
just, if you want to check, here's where you go. And then I didn't have to try and remember later when they'd question a specific detail. I could be like, no, here's exactly where it came from. But I learned that the hard way after having to go back through all my research and try and find that one detail that they're like, this couldn't have happened. I'm like, no, actually it did. I did my work. I did my research. And so Nancy is like, I wish you could come to Louisville, Rachel. The Belle is a fun riverboat. So
I want to.
when you can go, I bet she'd be willing to meet you there.
Yes, I would love to go. I want to, like, after writing the story, it's just, I had to learn about steamboats and steamboat knowledge and steamboat terms. And just like Vera had her own talk of jazz, the rivermen have their own talk, instead of left and right, it's port and starboard. And just they have their own slang. When they go up the hill, that means they're wharfed and they're going to go to the town. So yes, I was like, the research for my time slip was probably the most fascinating I actually really looked forward to learning about it and how the flow of pipes were. The steamboats. Maybe I'm weird.
That's so fun. And that interest and that enthusiasm for it will come out in your writing. And so that's really fun to hear because I know that will come through to make the story even more realistic and enjoyable for readers. So that's awesome. Well, we have actually gone over. So a reminder for everybody, leave a comment. Rachel wants to give away an ebook of The Red Canary. And I know some of you have read it and loved it, but for those of you who haven't, be sure and drop a comment. And I'm going to give away a copy of Lethal Intent. I've got some ARCs to give away. So leave a copy, and then tomorrow we will draw some winners, randomly selected. And thanks so much for joining us. Rachel, thank you so much for being with me tonight. This has been a lot of fun.
It was
and
fun.
Is there anything that you would like to say to those readers who are watching as we wrap up?
Nope, just go read Lethal Intent and leave a review. No, I was just such a blast talking to you. I think we can talk books probably well into the night. But thank you so much for having me on here. It's such an honor. I really admire you, and I'm just thankful for having me here.
Yeah, thanks. And just for those of you who are tuning in, here are some of the books that we recommended. So Lady in Residence just came out by Allison Pittman. And then When Twilight Breaks by Sarah Sundin, we've both read and loved. The Paris Dressmaker by Christy Cambron. I tell you, I had the best mail day today. And then Glory Falls, which Janine will be joining me next Tuesday. And I love these covers. I think they are just wonderful with all of that. I don't know, the colors or something. And then I've just started this one and Rachel really loved it. It's set at the World's Fair in Chicago, turn of the century. So those are some books if you're looking for ones that have mystery and history, except for this one. It's not historical. Close, give it away.
But there's some historical elements. There's a singing in the rain scene in that one.
Oh, and we talked about Singing in the Rain. So
we
love our classic movies. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And thank you, Rachel. Have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you next week.